Breaking news, Jon Gruden is out as coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. He has resigned after more leaked emails revealed homophobic language, and the Raiders and Gruden have decided to part ways. This was an investigation of the Washington football team. Gruden was sending emails to Bruce Allen, who worked at Washington in 2015, earlier than that even in some cases, and those emails, which were part of the investigation, came to light, and as a result, Gruden, who said things in those emails that were, quite frankly, you can pick your word, but homophobic language, let's go with that for now. And as a result, Gruden, I have resigned as head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. I love the Raiders and do not want to be a distraction. Thank you to all the players, coaches, staff, and fans of Raider Nation. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt anyone, end quote. All right, I'm Eric Casilius with CBS Sports senior NFL writer Jonathan Jones, who confirmed this story and has been following this for most of the evening. We know that Gruden is out. Other than that, what can you tell us about what's going on here?
Well, and so the Raiders are going to move on with interim head coach, the special teams coach, Benincasa there. And, you know, the Raiders as a team are going to try to move forward. And speaking with sources there in Vegas over the weekend, the folks that I spoke to said, hey, yeah, these are out there and it makes you look at someone differently. No doubt it's ridiculous and it's dumb, but we still have a job to do. And what one man says in private is not going to affect me or my job. That's what I heard from a source there over the weekend. And then, of course, when these extra emails, if you will, came out from the New York Times, it was really just a matter of time for Jon Gruden. And it was just what it was going to look like. Would he be fired by the Las Vegas Raiders and owner Mark Davis, or would he resign? And we're certainly going to learn more about the buyout details. He signed that 10-year, $100 million contract back in 2018 to become the head coach of the then Oakland Raiders for the second time, and now, of course, in Vegas. But the first head coach to lose his job here in the 2021 season is Gruden, trying to get back to the playoffs and bring this franchise back. And of course, this ends in a failed tenure here and a very embarrassing, unceremonious end for Jon Gruden.
You mentioned timing and additional emails. Apparently, as what we've heard, is the Raiders knew about these additional emails. Again, there was a first round of emails, came out earlier last week. Gruden apologized. Then second emails came out. Now, when we say came out, they're all part of an investigation that was concluded several months ago. So the league knew about these, and the Raiders apparently got wind of these second-round emails on Friday. He coached on Sunday, and now he is out on Monday. That timing says what to you?
Well, the entire thing is very interesting. So to go back on Friday is when the initial story came out from the Wall Street Journal, and it was containing the one email that Jon Gruden had sent about a decade ago to then Washington team president Bruce Allen, a friend of his, where he used a racist trope in referring to NFLPA Executive Director DeMaurice Smith. And of course, that was during the 2011 lockout. That was shortly after the Washington football team, then of course known as the Redskins, had been fined for certain salary cap maneuvers in the uncapped year of 2010. And so that was the first one. And then we heard from an ESPN report that there would be another email about Roger Goodell calling him some sort of word, but not saying what that derogatory word was. And then on Monday evening, the New York Times, with the trove of emails revealing in quotations a number of homophobic and misogynistic remarks that Jon Gruden had made over the years. Now, some people will say that this was 10 years ago. Some of those emails were as recently as 3 or 4 years ago for Jon Gruden that we saw revealed in the New York Times. But, Ike, your question was about maybe why the timing and why now. This was an investigation into the Washington football team and the toxic workplace culture under team owner Dan Snyder, who received no punishment from the league, and then team president Bruce Allen. That investigation did not turn up any actual physical report. Beth Wilkinson, the investigator, did not turn in that physical report to the league. The league apparently didn't want it. It was just an oral presentation, and then they decided what the punishment would be. However, in the discovery process of this investigation, they had more than 600,000 emails that you would have to assume had been culled through for some time. And so at some point in at least the past week, and maybe even before that, these emails were leaked to the Wall Street Journal, who then did an investigation and wrote the story that then dropped on Friday afternoon. But The Las Vegas Raiders had those emails on Friday, and they decided to keep it status quo with Jon Gruden en route to their loss to the Chicago Bears. And then when more emails finally were made public on Monday night, that is then when they made the decision to part ways with Jon Gruden, and they're parting ways with him via a resignation on Gruden's part.
All right, so the special teams coach, Rich Bisaccia, is now the head football coach. Gruden is out. The Raiders knew on Friday about these emails. He coached on Sunday. We don't know why, but we know he's out on Monday. Now we are at a spot where Jon Gruden has resigned. We'll find out the details if there was a buyout as we go. But what else? What now? What in the immediacy coming up in the next few days?
Well, I think that we're going to hear from a number of Raiders players. And really the first and only time we were able to hear from Raiders players were after that loss to the Chicago Bears. And we heard some players taking their coaches back. And, of course, there was only really 1.5 emails that had been revealed at that point. But we heard a no comment, for example, from Yannick Ngakoue, who was saying, I want to stay more focused on the game. We're going to hear from other players. We're going to hear now that he's out of the building. Certainly, that's not going to hover over them, and they'll be able to say more what they would like to say, perhaps, than what they would be able to say if he were still the head coach. And then, of course, Carl Nassib, the defensive end for the Las Vegas Raiders, the first openly gay active NFL player in the league's history. He's going to, I would have to assume, have plenty to say about this with the revelation of these homophobic remarks and slurs that were used by Jon Gruden over the years in private emails. And so be very interested, of course, to hear his thoughts and the support that will come around Carl Nassib from his teammates and from the outside community. And so that's the sort of immediate. What happens to Jon Gruden? You would have to imagine that he has now issued his statement that we read earlier, and he's probably going to be quiet for some time. But, what is his immediate future? It's probably going on a bit of an apology tour after being quiet and trying to sort of re-ingratiate himself in this football world. We know that he has had a home in the Tampa area, and, that's the immediate future, of course, for Jon Gruden.
All right, so the league, do they do anything here? Because as we talk about all the time, people sort of assume that Roger Goodell is on top and the owners are underneath him. But as you've talked about, as I've talked about, as we pointed out, the owners own the league and the teams, and Roger Goodell works for them. And they ultimately decide. And you pointed out that the Washington that situation, we never finally got that. Is there any chance that the Raiders are in any kind of hot water here? Or are we just basically now, the coach is gone, this was an embarrassment for the league, you hope everybody does better, seal this up, and move on and play football on Sunday?
Yeah, the issue has been taken care of, would probably be the league's stance, at least as it pertains to the Las Vegas Raiders. Again, these emails that were sent were outside of Jon Gruden's employ with the Oakland or Las Vegas Raiders. They were when he was unemployed or when he was a commentator on Monday Night Football with ESPN. And so it's hard to imagine that there would be any sort of punishment from the league. Very clearly, I think that we can sort of say the leaks of these emails very likely came from the league, that they, for whatever reason, wanted these emails out there and wanted the Raiders to act, and there was a slow drip of these leaks, and that would certainly show that the league didn't want to act on Roger Goodell, but wanted action, on Jon Gruden, but wanted action taken on Jon Gruden. So that's sort of, piecing all these pieces of the puzzle together, and it's a pretty obvious one when you start connecting the dots. Mark Davis has just put out a statement saying that he has accepted the resignation of Jon Gruden, and it was a very terse and brief statement. But really more concerning, I think, for the league, for owners, team owners in the league, for folks who are high up in the food chain of many teams, is if you sent an email to anyone with the Washington football team over the past decade, the league probably has that email. They have 650,000 of those emails, and we're seeing that they can go out and be used in ways that they deem appropriate. And you'd have to wonder, with a toxic workplace culture that was so bad that there had to be punishment in many areas of the Washington football team, but none, of course, to the team owner, Dan Snyder, other than a little slap on the wrist there publicly. you have to wonder, is this ammunition that's eventually going to be used against you or your team in the future? Of course, the story is about Jon Gruden and about him using very incredibly unacceptable, homophobic, racist language and all of the things under the sun there. But that's going to be something, Eric, as we kind of talk about what happens after this, what's going to be next. You have to think and sort of brace for a next in terms of 10, a dozen more emails out of the 650 about anybody else in the NFL.
And we will continue to monitor this story as we have with our best people on it so that you get the very latest as to what's going on. But Jon Gruden is no longer the coach of the Raiders. Here's his statement. I have resigned as head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. I love the Raiders. I don't want to be a distraction. Thank you to all the players, coaches, staff, and fans of Raider Nation. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt anyone. Brief statements, sort of the rule of the day here. Here's the owner of the Raiders, Mark Davis. I've accepted Jon Gruden's resignation as head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. End quote. So you can close the book on Gruden's tenure as the coach in Las Vegas, and we will see what comes next in this situation as it develops. More. All right, Jon Gruden and the Las Vegas Raiders are parting ways. Their head coach is going to resign after more leaked emails revealed homophobic language. This is now sort of per several reports and everywhere. It's confirmed by our Jonathan Jones. These emails ultimately undo Gruden as the head coach. Owner Mark Davis and Gruden met. Gruden is no longer the guy in Vegas. So let's figure out what's what and what we need to know. Let's get everybody up to speed now. Let's bring in our NFL insider, Jason La Canfora, so that I can sort of turn it over to him and let him do his thing and tell us what he knows and what we should know about this. So that's exactly how I'm going to do it, JLC. What do we know at this hour as this story continues to move forward about Jon Gruden, who is no longer the coach in Las Vegas?
Well, the reality, EK, is everything that we know now was turned over to the Raiders and Jon Gruden on Friday. Now, at that point in time, we only knew what the Wall Street Journal had reported. By we, I mean us in the public. And that was this particular email exchange that included horribly racist content about DeMaurice Smith and the NFLPA. But the league at that point in time knew about the nature of these other emails. They turned it over to the Raiders. Mark Davis decided it was okay for Jon Gruden to coach that game, again, knowing everything that we now know from the New York Times article as well as the Wall Street Journal article. They didn't censure him. They didn't put him on any sort of leave. It was, we're going to go play a football game. And now we know what else was in there, including, calling the commissioner of the NFL the F word, using incredibly homophobic language, using misogynistic language, exchanges with Bruce Allen, the former team president of the Washington football team, that included topless cheerleaders from the Washington football team. And that obviously is something that was very much at the core of that investigation into Dan Snyder's toxic culture in Washington, which, wow, it's kind of interesting that the only thing we know about that, since there was no formal report to the league, is through the prism of the Gruden Bruce Allen emails. But again, Mark Davis and the Raiders did nothing. More got out. They have the first openly gay active player in NFL history. I understand what was going on with Michael Sam, but this is a little different with Carl Nassib. He came out during his career. He's on that roster. It's sad. It's
JLC, when
there's no place for this in our society.
Of course. And what's interesting, when I hear you say, look, the Raiders knew about this on Friday, let him coach. Was this a thing where they thought that maybe this wouldn't get out? Was this we're going to make the move, but we're going to wait till next week? I mean, what's the motivation for the Raiders when they find out on Friday to not really take any action? Do we even know what that is yet?
We don't, but they knew.
Yep.
Whether they thought more wouldn't get out, we could only speculate as to what their motivation was, knowing what they knew, what we all know now. But the reality was They let him get in front of the team. They let him say what he wanted to say. They let him lead him onto the field against Chicago. And he was employed up until this New York Times article came out. And then within, the hour, he was no longer running that organization. So I guess all I could say is make of that what you will. But this is not just about a football coach. Jon Gruden, when they brought him in, was given a 10-year, $100 million contract, and he was given carte blanche to oversee everything about that organization. He was much more than a football coach. He had as much power as Bill Belichick. Mike Mayock, the GM, worked for him. Everybody there worked for him. He had final say on everything. What color the walls were and how furry the carpet was. You know what I mean? Are we going to everything? Are we going to redo this? Are we going to redo that? It was Jon Gruden's operation. So there are massive ramifications from this. Where does Mark Davis go next? Does the next coach have as much power? Is the next coach going to want to work with Mike Mayock? Is Mike Mayock stick around there longer now? Because Mike Mayock almost got fired by Jon Gruden last spring. The tumult, the impact this will have on that organization can't be overstated. But the reality is this is a story that's about a whole lot more than football. And then there's also the aspect of the interim situation. And do they go with Gus Bradley, who's done a pretty good job as their D coordinator in his former head coaching experience? Do they go with Greg Olson, longtime quarterback guru, help Gruden call plays on offense? Do they go with special teams coach Rick Bisaccia, who has interviewed for head coaching jobs in the past, and try to let the coordinators run their side?
That's it. They've gone with the special teams coach. Apparently, it's just come out 2 seconds. They've gone with the special teams coach. So that is the interim head coach now. We are just learning that as you and I are talking. Sorry that I'm keeping you from your phone, but we need you for a few minutes because I know you've been chasing this down. Everything you say, obviously, is incredibly informative, and especially when you say, listen, there are massive ramifications and ripple effects that are going to come from this. So when you have so many things that could come, you sort of look at what's right in front of you. What's in the immediacy here now? What happens next in the next 24, 48, 72 hours as the Raiders get ready to play a football game this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a lot on Rich Bisaccia's plate. He still has special teams to run. He now becomes the voice of the team. Jon Gruden is a larger-than-life figure. We all know about Chucky and his persona and what he was like as a broadcaster and what he was like as a head coach previously with the Raiders and the Bucs and then the Raiders again. A lot of guys signed on for that. I mean, they haven't drafted that well. I mean, they've lost a couple games in a row. Is the 3-0 start fugazi? Derek Carr's futures, another one, right? I mean, Derek Carr had seemingly quickly become a Gruden guy this year. He wasn't in the past. Gruden thought about moving off of him numerous times in the past. I mean, there's so much, Eric.
All right, so
now
it's
going to affect every piece of that roster.
What's the league do now, right? I mean, it's an interesting dynamic. It's not like other businesses. Roger Goodell works for the owners. They don't work for him. And you have an owner who has made a move to get his coach out when apparently he knew about this on Friday. What does the league do now? Especially, I'll even throw in the idea that these are emails when a guy wasn't employed by the league that he sent.
What does the league do to owners? I would just tell you again, what do we know about the Washington football team investigation? What do we know about Dan Snyder's emails? What do we know about Bruce Allen's emails with Dan Snyder? Lord knows there must have been hundreds of them a day. We know zilch, right? So you said it. The owners are the league. You don't see owners get sanctioned very often by the league, even with Dan Snyder. When they finally did get around to suspending him, they wouldn't call it a suspension. I mean, that part, I think, if you pay any attention, you said it, right? The owners pay Roger Goodell's salary. So the league stepping in and saying, hey, you didn't do something fast enough. You didn't, fire him, or he didn't resign fast enough. That's not the way it works.
Thank you very much for clearing that up. I always say that to people. It's like they forget that Roger Goodell works for the owners. The owners don't work for Roger Goodell. And so what he is allowed to do is what you're allowed to do to your bosses, I guess. Excellent job. Thank you so much for being on this and giving us your perspective. Breaking news from the NFL, Jon Gruden has resigned as coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. The move made after more emails came to light showing Gruden using homophobic and inappropriate language. Gruden steps down less than 4 years into his 10-year deal. Special teams coach Rich Bisaccia. Yep, that's it. Rich Bisaccia is your new head coach of the Raiders. All right, for more on this, let's bring in CBS senior NFL writer Josina Anderson. Josina, you've had a chance to speak with players regarding this development. What has been the reaction to Jon Gruden, this situation, and now no longer being the coach in Las Vegas?
Well, I can really tell you how the reaction has evolved. You know, when the news first broke from the Wall Street Journal and I was talking to Raiders players about it, I can't say that they were expressing a lot of ire towards the situation. It was more indicating to me the things that they were hearing from head coach Jon Gruden, because at the time the news officially broke from the from the Wall Street Journal, rather, you know, they hadn't had an opportunity to fully read the article. And you could kind of get the sense that they were just trying to focus on the Chicago Bears. And then tonight, when the New York Times broke the news, you could kind of tell that they were wondering, okay, what else is coming out, not having an opportunity to fully read the article. But since they have now kind of heard the things that have come out, they're expressing surprise. I talked to one Raiders player who said, you know, this morning we were focusing on Denver. He had indicated that he was saying other things than what we had initially heard. So he knew that it probably was some foul stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm still hearing players say, this is not the guy that we know. So it's very interesting when you're hearing a lot of people outside of this mention that this is the comments that were initially made about NFLPA Executive Director DeMaurice Smith being racially insensitive, being a racist trope type of comment. That I'm not really hearing that type of ire with the players. But now that additional language has come out reportedly with what Jon Gruden has said in these past emails about other people in the league, around the NFL, I think that you can tell that the scale and the weight and the gravity of the comments are really starting to hit the players more, is how I would describe it.
Okay, now, Josina, as an NFL insider who's part of our family, you get to talk to players, and sometimes you're just talking just to get sort of a sense. This time on Sunday morning, it was, okay, the story was there were some racially insensitive things, to use the language that you said, about DeMaurice Smith. Do you think, what were the players reacting to that at all on Sunday? Did it affect that locker room at all coming into Sunday? How was this in terms of the Raiders and their performance against the Bears on Sunday?
Trust me, I would definitely tell you if that is what I heard. And I have to sit here and tell you that's not what I heard. I heard players who were not necessarily overly angry at the comment. You know, one person even said to me that, you know, it came across to them as more of a joke. And they said to me, as long as it wasn't the N-word. So it didn't get described to me as them feeling like what they heard was super egregious or anything that a lot of players were overly reacting to, at least from the players that I was talking to. And even tonight, when the news broke from the New York Times, and I was asking their opinions about it, many of them hadn't even read the article, and I was kind of trying to describe the things that it was saying. And I don't think they really understood at the time even the gravity of the words at that moment, as far as what it could lead to, which is now the resigning or the parting of ways with Jon Gruden and the Raiders. But now that more time has passed and it's sat more on their minds, I think that they have a better understanding. But my initial feeling, based on what they were reflecting to me initially with the comments regarding DeMaurice Smith, and now that the other emails have come to light with what he said, initially I would say that it was, you know, that's not the guy we know. You know, all right, maybe, you know, just not really fully grasping it. But I feel like now with more time, they're beginning to understand it more, you know. So I can't really sit up here and tell you that they were overly angry.
You're very clear. I get it. And I think that's a great perspective to offer us. Now, straight ahead, what's next here? I mean, there's going to be ripple effects, whether it be the league office, the players, the team, Jon Gruden himself, Mark Davis. There's going to be effects, and there's going to be things that happen the next few days. Any idea what's next here?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if we see an additional statement from the NFL. I mean, obviously, right now, Raiders owner Mark Davis has gone ahead and made the move to have this discussion with Jon Gruden a few hours ago, and it resulted in the two of them. Some are saying parted ways, some are saying Jon Gruden resigned. Either way, he's not there anymore. The NFL, prior to this, had already released a statement saying that they were appalled and that the language was wholly against the values of the NFL. We'll see if they release an additional statement. But I can tell you that league sources, the people who I just talked to, as far as their impression of the series of events, have really commented on the rapid nature with which these emails have come to light, particularly when you look at controversy that has surrounded even owners in the NFL and investigations taking a long time, and you're not getting this amount of detail in this short of time. So just even looking at that, some people are commenting on, in their opinion, maybe perhaps that the league wanted the Raiders and the club to do the action as opposed to it coming from headquarters. But on top of that, I would say I wouldn't be surprised if an additional email comes out just to address the wider scope of the things that we heard tonight, as opposed to what initially was coming out that was just directed towards NFLPA Executive Director DeMaurice Smith.
CBS Senior NFL Insider Josina Anderson giving us that perspective. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. All right, so here are your statements. Jon Gruden, I resigned as head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. I love the Raiders, and I don't want to be a distraction. Thank you to all the players, coaches, staff, and fans of Raider Nation. I'm sorry. Never meant to hurt anyone. Additionally, a statement from the owner, Mark Davis. I have accepted Jon Gruden's resignation as head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. More as this story continues to evolve straight ahead with us right here on HQ.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.